Martin King. Was he a punk? No. What is the King's thing? If your enemy converts you to their way of thinking, the victory is lost. It's not who's standing at the end, it's who still believes what they believe. And the minute you turn into them, you stop existing. So for them, again, that sentence we see again, it says the renunciation of actual being, meaning what? My house, my car, my job, my social status, my ability to say I'm so-and-so, I'm this, I'm that. The renunciation of actual being for historical being. How will I be remembered? How will I be remembered? Glory is a garbage movie, but there's only so far you can go to mess up the black radical tradition. At this moment, at Fort Pillow, will I give my life? Why? Because my life is not real in the larger context. How will I be remembered for what I did at this moment? You trained your historical being your physical being, actual being for historical being. The preservation of the ontological totality. What is ontology? Anybody know? Ontology is the nature of being. What is the nature of your being? Your physical being, your spiritual being, the being of your whole experience, past, present, and future, as it convenes in you. In other words, the surreal idea that this period we have, this 30, 40, 50, 20, 80, 90, 110, 15 years we have that we're aware of, that we would call life, what if it's the exact opposite? What if life is everything else and this is just a momentary respite? But the idea that you have to consider the totality of beingness, your ontology, this forms the center of the African radical tradition. So he says, the ontological totality granted by a metaphysical system, meaning a system beyond historical materialism, beyond just counting how many pieces of money you have or how many bushels of wheat you collected, how much money you have made, beyond that, a metaphysical system, the substance of things not seen, the evidence rather of things not seen, that had never allowed, meaning what? In its African reality, in the surreal, absurd encounter with the absurd, and since then, that had never allowed for property, either in the physical, philosophical, temporal, legal, social, or psychic senses. Meaning what? What is property? What do you own? First week of property law class, you go to law school, they teach you about enclosures, then they teach you about titles, and the famous phrase you'll learn, to A, for life. What is that? That's the contract that allows you to have property. And that's what you have a life interest, meaning when A dies, what happens? The property cedes back to the previous owner. And from that lesson to the end of the semester, Negroes struggling in property class. I know the title says this, but that's just wrong. This woman and this man lived together for 50 years. He died. His wife, who he never divorced because it cost too much money, it was too much trouble, came in and cremated him. That's just wrong. Only she did that because she was messing around in the affair. Everybody know what the relationship was. In other words, why do we have to have property interests in persons that are not, we don't honor that. Why did you go to jail? Because when they came and said that I could not adopt her, even though I had her in my house for 11 years, I said I would shoot anybody come on this porch. And how did I go to jail? In other words, what does he say? Never allow for property, either the physical, philosophical, temporal, legal, social, or psychic senses. Meaning what? The temporal sense is what? Time. What does property mean in the time sense? Think about it. Right. Long term, and we don't allow property in the temporal sense. Meaning what? Traditions that need to be rewritten. This is almost raised the question of African modernity. Do the Obamas belong in the White House? Yeah. They're the first, I know. What if Michelle said, I'm going to paint this room red, black, and green instead of just the green room? That's very radical. And she would say, whatever. Well, I don't know what she would say, but I'm saying, do that and see what happens. We don't honor property in the temporal sense. If it ain't ours especially. Wait, this ain't nothing. Guess what? This ain't nothing but a room. Y'all losing y'all mind over a damn room. You live in the room, paint the room. In other words, you have this sense that, we gotta leave it like this. Okay, I understand you want to honor what happened, but guess what? You live it now. There's a balance between those situations. You preserve, you have genealogies, you respect, but then you improvise. So out there Friday, y'all start singing them old songs from the 60s. That's great. You got a few songs from the 80s. That's great. At that point, you got to put your thing down. Right? It's got to look different, and you know that. So now you're tweeting and you're texting, and people got stuff on YouTube. Right? It's your turn. You have no property value in time that makes you stay somewhere where you were. You honor where you were, you link to where you were, but it's your obligation to extend that property interest forward. You don't have to respect something simply because it was. That's part of the black radical tradition. We learned that when faced with a situation that wanted us to stay in a certain place. So, let's continue. Anything else? I just brought some of those examples. Anything else from the forward, prefaces, and chapter 1, particularly forward and preface? What matters? Surrealist, George Clinton, paint the White House black. George Clinton, definitely surreal. Yes? Which one? Page 4, yeah. 14, 1-4, yes. XIV, XIV, yes. Robin Kelly, yes.
This line from the Bible?
Yes.
Talks about the counter-missionary role.
Yes.
As bishops of racial denominations, including the empire.
Yes.
Kind of the role of the bourgeoisie play.
Yes.
He calls the name bourgeoisie. Pretty much the black elite still conflicted in their role as victims of the system, but also key players in it.
Yes.
And I thought that tied well with the conversation we had last week about the tax model.
Yes. Yes. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to resist this thing. It takes a lot. First of all, it requires you to trust yourself. And by trust yourself, I don't mean yourself individually, I mean yourself collectively. That's why we talk about the ground rules of intellectual work. These high school kids from Philly over the last 10 years, prison schools, we've been working through these ground rules that they came up with. First one is to be present. You got to know yourself. Meaning what? When you come in a room, you bring everybody with you. You're not alone. You bring everybody with you. So you got to trust yourself. The second thing is that in trusting yourself, you must always elevate the standard of knowing yourself. It ain't no thing for us to change curriculum at Howard. You got to know what we did, and you got to be committed to knowing it so well that if anybody come for you, they take 2 steps, look at you, and then quietly back out. Because there's nothing that can stand in the face of you engaged with yourself. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Let's look at it. Let's look at that language that he brings up. Because this intelligentsia has been tasked with that. In fact, let's start at the beginning of that paragraph on page XIV. Therefore, the first waves of African New World revolts were governed not by a critique of Western society, but rather a total rejection of the experience of enslavement and racism. Last semester in Black Religion, Ritual, and Philosophy, African Deep Thought, we read a book, Black Magic. And in that book, what you saw is the first waves of enslaved Africans completely rejected anything had to do with their enslavers. And well, actually, Black Magic doesn't talk about that as much as Exchanging Our Country Marks, Michael Gomez's book. In other words, according to Gomez, these first people on the plantations who worked in the plantation, in the house, combing hair, washing clothes, somebody said, Celie, you can have that dress. That damn dress. You can brush your hair. You better take that down.